Salli ala nabiyyina Salli ala Muhammadin.
This question is, what is the factual evidence with regard to the belief that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was the promised Messiah as predicted by the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and others?
What argument would satisfy him? That's the point. There are so many arguments in favor of his claim being true. But it all depends on what he's thinking about. For instance, I can quote just one hadith, which is a hadith apparently, but it is based on Quranic truth. It is based on Quranic truth and also on the truth of biblical prophecies. I'm talking of the events which have been predicted when the sun will cease to give light and the moon will join the sun in this process. Now, what does it mean? According to the tradition of the Holy Prophet, it means that eclipse of the sun and eclipse of the moon both will take place together in 1 month. And with that interpretation, which had to be divinely guided, he predicted that this prophecy will get fulfilled only at the time of the right Imam Mahdi, the one who will represent him. Because the words which he uses are Inna le mahdiyana ayatayn lam tukuna mundu khalqi samawati wal ard. For our Mahdi, there are two signs which never appeared as signs for anyone else. Now these two signs, as mentioned by him, are that the moon will get eclipsed on the, let me say, the middle of the moon's eclipse, and the sun will get eclipsed at the end of the month.
The first night of the moon.
What?
The first night of the moon and the first of the three.
I know, and middle day of the sun. Now, Imam Sahib reminds me that all the 3 nights of moon's eclipse are not mentioned, but the first night of the moon's eclipse is mentioned. And also the middle day of sun's eclipse is mentioned. Now, anybody knows that the eclipse dates of the moon are only 3 dates: 13th, 14th, and 15th. So 13th has to be the first one. And also, all people who are familiar with the subject know that again for the sun there are only 3 days of eclipse: 27th, 28th, and 29th. And 28th is the middle of the 3 days. Now, when Hazrat Mirza Sahib claimed to be that Mahdi, whose advent was predicted by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, up till that time there was no sign of any eclipse. He claimed to be the Mahdi when he founded the Ahmadiyya Jamaat in 1889. There was no sign of any eclipse. And nowadays, the science has advanced to be able to predict somewhat in future regarding the eclipses. But still, the scientists admit their defeat. They cannot clearly predict any eclipse, either of the sun or the moon, within next 2-3 years. There are many other factors which are variable, and it's not possible for even the scientists of today to predict this. Now, when Hazrat Mirza Sahib claimed to be that Imam Mahdi, who was the Imam Mahdi of Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mullahs began demanding from him to produce the sign of the eclipse. The papers were all full of this. They said, all right, if you are Imam Mahdi, show us the sign which was to appear from the heaven. It happened in 1894. For almost 5 years after his claim to Mahdaviyyat. It was impossible scientifically to predict that. But there are other factors which are involved which make the situation even more complex. All people who know the phenomenon of eclipses know that eclipses can take place in one horizon or another, but it's very difficult for both eclipses, that of moon and the sun, to be visible from the same horizon. Because it's possible the sun may eclipse in Pakistan, moon may eclipse in Bangladesh, for instance, anywhere. But this hadith told us that such eclipses would be visible from the same vantage point. Otherwise, it could not be quoted as a proof. Now, what happened in 1894, the moon got eclipsed on the 13th and the sun got eclipsed on the 28th, which is the middle of the sun's eclipse. And this happened on a wide horizon, beginning from Mecca to Qadian. It covered both. Now, this is also amazing because some scientists whom I employed to work it out, they submitted their report that this is very rare, that both the moon and the sun should be observed to have eclipsed from the same horizon, spreading as far as from Mecca or Medina to Qadian. But this is exactly what happened. So this is a sign which any unprejudiced person should bow to, should accept. But only if you are bent upon refusing the truth of the Imam Mahdi, then it's your choice, you can do whatever you like. But this prophecy, which should be remembered, is not only the sign of the truth of the Mahdi, but also, in the first place, it is a sign of the truth of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. How on earth he could produce such a prophecy 1400 years ago? Unbelievable. So those who hate Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, at least they claim to love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and God has bracketed these two in a manner that if you really love Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you should not reject any prophecy which is a tribute to his truth and the greatness of his prophecies. So I think for the time being this should be sufficient, right?